Is Rio 2016 the worst Olympics in living memory? From empty stadiums, poor weather, allegations of corruption, bad decisions in boxing, green diving pools. It seems to have been one bad news story after another. For a reminder of the good, the bad and the ugly, let's have a listen to this.
Hi lads, how are things?
What's the crack?
We're in Rio. Usain Bolt is powering clear. He looks across to the line. 19.79 seconds. Usain Bolt is the champion again.
You think of people like Sir Chris Hoy who come here and do it time and time again, and to be able to repeat my success in London, honestly, it's just, I can't even explain what I'm going through right now. I'm just so happy.
50 metres to run. It's Mo Farah. The glory run again for Mo Farah. Mo Farah wins the 10,000 metres for the second time in a row with the performance of his career.
I've been shook enough now, to be honest, since the racing is a bit tired now and the legs are like jelly, but yeah, I suppose we did a bit of celebrating and did the podium thing and got to put on the podium pants as well, so that was quite nice, and saw the mother and the father and a few other people and took a few pictures and that.
I just can't believe it. Like I don't even believe it's happened yet. Like when we saw that review on the final point, I can't describe my feelings. I'm just completely lost for words.
From all of this comes a picture which emerges of an intertwined network of state involvement in the operations of both Moscow and Sochi Labs. It was a fail-safe method of permitting cheating Russian athletes to compete while using performance-enhancing substances.
The head of the Irish and European Olympic Committees, Patrick Hickey's been arrested in Rio over illegal Olympic ticket sales.
I got here about an hour and a half ago, I suppose, and it was turning green, but it looks more like your back lawn at home in your back garden.
The guy pulled out his gun, he cocked it, put it to my forehead, and said, "Get down," and I was like, I put my hands up, I was like, whatever. He took our money, he took my wallet. But he left your cell phone, he left your credential. He left my cell phone, he left my credential, but he took my wallet.
I've always said I was going to be Olympic champion. Today I feel it's been robbed of me, so I'm distraught. I may not be crying, but inside I'm roaring.
So, there you have it, a little flavour of the good, the bad and the ugly, as I say, as far as the past couple of weeks in Rio is concerned. Let's hear now from my guests. Let's hear what they have to say about the past couple of weeks of competition and organisation. Johnny Davis is a former Olympic fencer who competed for Team GB in the Seoul Games in 1988 and the Barcelona Games in 1992. Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson is the former Paralympic athlete who won 16 medals, including 11 gold, and Felicity Huston was in Rio supporting her son Patrick, who was of course representing Team GB in Northern Ireland in archery. You're all very welcome to the programme. I'm going to start with you, Johnny, because you were on the programme a couple of weeks ago at the start of the Olympics, and we were discussing whether the Olympian dream is still alive, and whether, as we looked ahead to 2 weeks of competition, we were expecting too much from the Olympics, and whether the Olympic goal had changed, really, if you like, the Olympic ideal, because so much sport now is professional. And you were saying it's still potentially the highlight of a sportsman or woman's dream to be an Olympian, as you are. That's the ultimate. Do you still think that? 2 weeks on?
I do, and that's from a position of privilege of having competed in the Olympics, so I'll always have a slightly distorted view on it. I think the problem is it's become so huge, it's become massive, and the lead up to it hasn't been great, and the continued issues. I think when you get that mix of politics, money, egos in any walk of life, you're going to have a pretty toxic mix, and unfortunately at the minute that seems to be rising. But the feedback I'm getting from the athletes is, somebody's asked me about transport yesterday. The feedback I'm getting is no one has missed their start time, for the athletes. None of the events have started late. So I think there are always infrastructure problems. The backdrop for Brazil was the 7th largest economy in the world and growing when they won the games. It's now, fallen through the bottom, but the whole economy is a complete disaster. Also, set against London, I think it's going to be very, very difficult for any games ever to follow that.
Yeah, it was a very high bar set 4 years ago. You know a bit about organising games. I mean, you were one of the key organisers of the World Police and Fire Games here in Northern Ireland a couple of years ago, so you know how difficult it is to get all the moving parts synchronised. And it's arguably, it's very easy to pick half a dozen things and say, that was a disaster, so was that, and so was that. But look at all the things that you don't see that are organised and have been organised like clockwork over the past 2 weeks.
Absolutely, and those are the bits with in reality, they aren't sexy for the press to talk about. Organised, I've been lucky enough to organise European Fencing Championships, Boccia World Cups, big events, police and fire games. You never see what's going on behind it, and there's always stuff that you're just swimming to make it work. I think that the expectation for the Olympics is huge. I think the scrutiny on it is huge because of the importance. I think the fact that the British press, because Britain is doing so well, it is they've the number of people flown out there to cover it. I mean, the BBC has something like 700 people there. So everyone who moves, the stories that we're getting, the American swimmers, Pat Hickey, all those things don't help. But I would say, for anyone who's been there, talk to the athletes when they come back, and then you really get the proper feedback on how good it has been.
Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson, you know a thing or two about competing in elite sporting events. When you look back over the past couple of weeks, do you think there's any validity in saying yes in answer to the question, worst games ever, or do you think that is missing the bigger point?
I think it's missing the bigger point, to be honest, because if you look back at previous games, Atlanta had issues with people coming to watch. Actually, so did Sydney. Sydney wasn't a sellout. There was loads of rain in Sydney because it was held during their springtime. Everyone kind of always imagines it's held in the so there's been lots of issues with games over the years. I think London, probably, and I'm biased because I worked on it, it was just a step up from everything else that have been, and lots of nations from around the world would say that. But I think it's hard because we expect a 2 weeks of an Olympics and 10 days of a Paralympics to change the world, and ultimately it's a sporting event. And you're right, there will be things that different cities do better than others, and I think actually what you have to basically look at is the field of play, and what the sport was like. And actually most of the sport's been amazing. There's some issues around some of the boxing decisions, but that's happened in different sports. That's happened before. It's happened in gymnastics before. So most of it, I think, has been all right.
Yeah, but it's hard to look completely past some of those other issues. Allegations of doping, horrendous judging decisions in boxing, this bizarre bunch of US athletes concocting a madcap story about being subjected to an armed robbery, and people just think, what in heaven's name is going on there?
I think the stuff with the American athletes is appalling. I mean, I don't know what they thought they were doing, and they're probably going to experience the consequences of that actually in the next few weeks. But I think, right, when Rio and Brazil bid for the Games, economically and politically, they were in a very different point. And you need 7 years to put the Games on. And I think what we've seen in the lead up, they only opened the Tube a week before the start of the Olympics. They hadn't built it, I think, 2 weeks before that. So I don't think you can go down the route of saying it can only be developed countries, it can only be countries with a certain GDP, because actually Brazil would have fitted that 7 years ago. So I think maybe the IOC need to look at the size of the Games and IPC too, the size of the Paralympics, and just about and look at things like whether you can use venues that have already been built. The constant desire to have a new Olympic stadium, and I think that puts lots of pressure on cities that they don't necessarily need.
Okay, I want to talk to you about the Paralympics in a moment or two, but I have to talk to Felicity Huston, who has an advantage on all of us because she's been out in Rio over the past couple of weeks supporting her son Patrick, who was, taking part in the archery competition out there. Felicity, welcome back again.
Hi,
and we spoke to you again, same time we spoke to Johnny, and you were looking ahead, and I think Patrick was taking part in his initial competition on that very day that we spoke. In fact, you couldn't get a ticket to it, which was Which was a hint, perhaps, at what was to come. The parents of one of the athletes, couldn't get in to see him taking part. Now,
well, I think it was more a misunderstanding. Apparently, non-ticketed event to those who've been to the Olympics before means there are no tickets. Nobody can get in. Unfortunately, to those who've never been before, we just think, I'll just turn up. Apparently, the same problem happened in London at Lord's for the archery. Most of the archers in the UK were standing trying to get in, to be told, no, I'm sorry, we don't allow an audience in. So it wasn't actually it wasn't as chaotic as perhaps it sounded.
Okay, so when it got going and when Patrick was competing properly, and unfortunately he didn't win a medal, but he did take part in the competition, and you were there to see that. What was your general sense of how archery was organised and how the games themselves were organised?
Well, I have to say the archery, I thought, was very well organised. Yes, Patrick got through very well in his first round, but unfortunately, the second round he came across the guy who ultimately won the gold medal. Archery's unforgiving. It's head-to-head elimination, that's it. So, and it was as wet as today when we watched him as well, so memories of home, standing in the rain, watching archery. But apart from that, I have to say archery was extremely well organised. As the Baroness was saying about using venues that are already there, the archery was held in the Sambadrome, which is where the carnival takes place, the main display for that. So that was very useful, and actually it was in the city, which was an advantage. We had chosen to stay not too far away from there. The big problem in Rio, I think, for a lot of the fans attending is the sheer scale of the city. It is absolutely enormous. I mean, London doesn't compare because of the geography. It's so spread out. So even though we were staying near the Sambadrome, it still took us about half an hour to get there. And then to go to some of the other events was an hour and a half away. I mean, it's absolutely huge. So archery, very well run, absolutely no complaints, on the dot, precise, no problems with any of the judging, anything like that. I have no criticism. And more volunteers than you could shake a stick at. I mean, they were everywhere to help people, which was great too.
Well, that's very positive. Tanni, I want to look ahead a little bit now. We've been looking back, but let's look forward to the Paralympics. Let's just say there was a bit of a frightener put on everybody a couple of days ago when some of the money looked like it might not come through, and you were saying you were concerned that the Paralympics themselves might not happen or might not happen in any recognisable form. Are you a little bit more positive now?
Well, the initial sort of publicity this week was around a travel grant that's made available to every country to help get the teams there. And there was a delay in payment, and the International Paralympic Committee came out very strongly and said, look, this has to be paid. And I wasn't really in doubt that was going to happen one way or another. And, lucky that, many countries could have afforded to find that money and send the athletes. Lots of countries couldn't. More worrying is there's been 3 big cuts to the Paralympic budget. And I think a lot of that was around making sure the Olympics happened. And again, I think the IPC have done it publicly to go back to Rio and say, look, and Brazil, and say, come on, you need to deliver the games that you're meant to. So it's things like, transport, food, refit of accommodation that might not be the same as expected. But the reality is, athletes do not live in 5-star accommodation. They're used to competing in front of 3 men and a dog. They are incredibly resourceful. So, if they get to the village and there are no blackout blinds, I mean, what we did once, we just went out and bought a roll of black plastic bags and duct taped them to the windows. The athletes will cope with an awful lot of what's there. Obviously, what you want is full stadium and you want everything to be great. But do they really care if there are flowers in Olympic Park? Not really. What they care about is the events are run on time and they can get there and they can live on the food. So I think what we're going to see in Rio is maybe not as great as we were expecting, but I think it'll be fine. I've spoken to a few athletes in the last couple of days. Do you know what? They're just letting all this wash over them, because that's what you have to do as an athlete. You just have to concentrate on the last 20 days of training and just think about, winning the medals that you're meant to.
The question, I suppose, is how much it will matter to Paralympians to see people in the stands actually watching their endeavours. How much does that matter at this level of elite sport?
Oh, it's really nice. I mean, I've competed in front of 100,000 and I've competed in front of my parents, and I know which I'd rather. And anyone would say the same. But I think, ultimately, there's all these things that an athlete can't change. What they need to be and what they want to do is just go out there and be the best they can be. And I think some of the disappointment is a few weeks out, Rio had said that a lot more tickets have been sold than it now it turns out have been. I mean, the tickets for Paralympics are much cheaper than the Olympics, and we might get some more take up in the last few days before the games. But you know what, the athletes can't get stressed out about any of that, because there is nothing any of them can do to impact it. They just have to, be the best they can. And I guess where we're lucky, the British team and, Irish team, other teams will have enough set up around them to mitigate a lot of these issues. There's lots of countries that won't have that. And I feel a lot of sympathy for those countries that don't have the support that our guys do.
Okay, great to hear from you, Tanni. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. I want to squeeze a couple of callers in very quickly. Patrick, a couple of sentences just to make your point, if you would.
Yeah, I'd say to all pessimistic people, I really enjoyed the Olympics, because you see they're champions. And you see watching champions should be tiddlywinks. They're so great at what they do. And I just couldn't get over it. The Brownlee brothers, and then you had Usain Bolt. And this morning I had the best laugh with a Japanese competitor who lifted her coach up in the air and threw him down on his back, celebrating. And I thought, good God, that was brilliant. Unscripted. And the whole thing, every morning I would put on catch up and see all these great athletes who trained for 4 years. And outside the Conlon thing, which I think was a disgrace, real disgrace, it shows you there is corruption somewhere, but I'd say that. Let's cheer on them champions. Hey,
okay.
Aren't they great to see?
A positive point to end on, Patrick. Thank you very much indeed. Johnny, I mean, that is a very positive point, and it's one that you made earlier. Despite all the criticism and all the things that didn't go quite right, there's been much more that's been positive than negative.
There has, and I think the point made by Dame Tanni Gray in particular is that the resilience of the athletes. The athletes get there. I think there's a lot of misconception about athletes and how they think about things. The resilience, the focus. This is 4 years, 8 years of people's lives, and they're very, very determined to make it work and work it through stuff.
Okay, we've got a couple of days left, and then of course we've got the Paralympics, which will be brilliant and was brilliant last time round in London, and we're looking forward to seeing that coverage on Channel 4 and lots more medals as well. Thank you very much to Johnny Davis with me in studio. Thanks to Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson joining us from London, and Felicity Huston back from Rio in Belfast. After 1 o'clock, we're